Hey everyone, welcome to Autodesk. No, not Autodesk. Welcome to Unreal Fest 2022. So today we're going to see Datasmith direct link workflows in Unreal Engine Editor. Just to start, how many people here have been using Datasmith first? Okay, so we've got a few. So in 5.0, we've been introducing the direct link functionality in the Unreal Engine. We've had a few softwares compatible with it. We've had Revit, we've had ArchiCAD, SketchUp, Rhino. And in 5.1, we are adding 3ds Max to the list. So let's have a look. First, for people here and on the live stream, you can get the plugins from this link. Be sure to match the plugin version to your engine version you're using. It can work one version. If you use, for example, 5.1 for the plugin, 5.0 for your Unreal Engine version might work, but we don't guarantee a full compatibility. So be sure to match it. Now, let's see a couple differences between 5.0 and 5.1 for the 3ds Max plugin for Datasmith. So in 5.0, we used the standard export menu from 3ds Max. There was no options, and we had no ability to send the data directly to Unreal or another Unreal-based app. It was using the File Explorer window. In 5.1, we're introducing a ribbon, which has tools unified between all the DCCs we support. There's options, especially for 3ds Max. We're going to see that in a couple of slides. And we introduced direct link as well as autosync, which is an automated link. So let's have a look at the ribbon a bit closer. So first we have the direct link panel. You have the connections button, which allows you to view your currently active connections. You have the synchronize button, which allows you to sync your DCC with Unreal Engine, either the editor or an Unreal Engine-based app using the Datasmith runtime plugin. So for example, one of our apps using that is Twinmotion. You have the toggle autosync button. So this one enables automatic syncs. So when you are changing something in your scene, for example, changing a transform on an object or changing a geometry, it's going to trigger a sync and send it automatically to your Unreal Engine editor. Then we've got the file export. So we're still keeping file export, so you can still export Datasmith scene files. You have an export button, pretty self-explanatory. We have an export selected, so when you have a selection in your editor, for example, a couple objects, this will only export your couple objects. And we have an option to change. So for Datasmith, we support animated transforms. This here, you can either export the whole time segment you have in Max, or just export one frame, which is the currently selected frame. And this is only for exports, so no animations with direct link. Now, for the settings menu, you have an option to change the maximum resolution for procedural textures. So this is not going to affect normal textures imported in your project. And so we go from a very low resolution up to very high. I think the maximum limit is 2K by 2K. For big textures, more than enough. And this will allow you to optimize your scene for the export, but also for the import and how it runs in the engine, because higher resolution textures means more VRAM. Also, we added a new option to export XREF scenes. In some cases, you don't want to export everything in your view when you have XREF, so this is a handy little option. And finally, the tools panel. So the messages window will give you some, it's like a log, basically. So we'll give you some info about what version of the plugin you're using. This is very useful. So when you have suggestions, reports to send us, do send us that little first line that says initial Datasmith SDK and the version. This is really helpful for us. And then you'll have stats on what bottlenecks there is in your export. For example, it could be like a massive mesh, and you'll see exported mesh, exported geometry, and I don't know, maybe 20 seconds, which is very long for just one mesh. And you also see errors or MISC logs and export duration. And finally, so this one you already had in the previous plugin in the form of a modifier. Now we have a shortcut to directly add on the selected object a Datasmith modifier. So the modifier allows you to set custom light map UVs, custom collision geometry, and also export geometry either as a static mesh or as a proxy. So let's have a look at direct link now. It's very simple to synchronize. So you can either use the synchronize button or toggle auto-sync. This will trigger a synchronize and then keep on the lookout for any changes in your scene to send to Unreal. Synchronize is a manual update. So if you synchronize and then expect something to change after changing your scene in 3ds Max, this is not going to happen. You'll have to press synchronize again to have the changes in Unreal. The connection buttons, so you'll see that window on the right. So this will show you all the sources you have, all the direct link sources you have, and that are available to sync with Unreal. And so the left part source is going to be the name of the project that's open, and the right one will be the destination. So when you have Unreal synced, it will tell you, for example, here it says UE5 editor and an ID for that instance of the editor. And so importing in UE5 is also really simple. So first, make sure that you have the Datasmith importer plugin enabled, as well as the Datasmith content. If you use one of our architecture templates, these are already enabled, so it's pretty simple for users. Then to import, you go as add to project, so that's the little cube icon with the plus, green plus. Then navigate to the Datasmith category and use direct link import. And this will open you a pop-up for all the available sources. So what's interesting with direct link is you can import sources from any software. So it could be 3ds Max, but you also have an instance of Revit or an instance of Rhino open. And you can import all of these successively. You can't import every source at once, but you can have all of these synchronized to Unreal and just send updates whenever you change in your DCC some stuff. So in the sources, you're going to have the machine it's running on, so it's going to be your local computer ID. Then the process, so what DCC is sending a direct link. Then the endpoint is going to be your editor, so it's going to be the Datasmith exporter, and the source is going to be the name of the file. And when you select your source, you'll have that pop up. If you use Datasmith, you know what it is, so it's just a few options. So you can, for example, disable light imports or material imports if you just want the geometry. And there's also some static lighting options for light map UVs. So with the direct link, there's a new icon that appears on your Datasmith scene file once the file is imported. So there's 4 different icons. These are statuses. The first one means that the project is synced, so that little lightning bolt in green means that your project is synced and it's using auto reimport. So auto reimport means that when there's an update sent by the DCC, when you press synchronize or there's an auto sync update, Unreal is going to reimport automatically the new content. It's going to sync to your DCC. On the right, top right, with the check icon, this means that you have a scene that is up to date, but auto reimport is not enabled. So when you do an update in your DCC, when you do a sync, if you don't reimport manually, it's going to change to the bottom left icon, which is that exclamation mark, which means that the scene is connected to the DCC, but it's not updated. So you'll need to either reimport manually or enable auto reimport. And finally, the last one on the bottom left, the bottom right, means that there's no direct link source available. Either it means that there's a connection issue somewhere, or that the DCC is just not available, or the project in your DCC is not open. So how do we restore a direct link connection to Unreal? Well, this is really simple. So, for example, we close the DCC, we have that red icon, means that the connection is lost. To reconnect, we need to reopen the DCC. It needs to be the same project file. Be careful if you do save backups like file save 001, file save 002. It will not work. It needs to be the same file exactly. Then the icon will change to that exclamation mark, orange exclamation mark. That means that it found there's a project to sync, but it's not synchronized yet. Then you need to press the synchronize button in your DCC or auto sync if you want it to be automated. And it's going to change to the green mark if you auto reimport or reimport manually. And of course, so for auto reimport, you right-click the scene, Datasmith scene file, and at the top there's a direct link auto reimport toggle. If you want to reimport, just click on that. So if you used Datasmith before with normal imports, we have the ability to support overrides. So for example, if you have a set material in your DCC, but you want to use a different material, for example, there's a very basic floor material in Max, but in Unreal you have a much better looking floor, but you still want to keep the link. You can just set the material on your object in Unreal, and it will keep in memory that the original material was the basic floor in Max. And if you want to reset that, you right-click on the actor and go at the bottom. There's a Datasmith category, and there's a reset override. And what I'll do is reset back to what the scene looked like out of the box from Max. So you can do that with materials, meshes, some properties as well. And so here's a few tips and tricks. So Datasmith scene files work kind of like packages. If you want to keep the geometry at the right position when you're setting adding a Datasmith scene file to your project, don't break the hierarchy it creates when you add the scene file, because this is kind of like the glue for the whole scene. But what you can do is add multiple scenes to the same level, and anytime you do an update in your DCC and it synchronizes, it will update all the instances of the Datasmith scene. Of course, if you have overrides, it'll keep the overrides as well. Some other tips and tricks. Be careful with material complexity, in particular in Max. I know there's, with V-Ray, Corona, I've seen some materials where, so this top right one is a floorboard material, and our translator is good, but it can do some strange conversions, and the simpler the material is, the better. You gotta also be careful about using a PBR workflow, because Unreal is using PBR. You can do some specular gloss, but try to do PBR. It'll look better, it'll run better. So only pluses. Try also to reset mesh X forms. So every time you do a mesh custom pivot and you don't do a reset X form, it's going to create an actor, and this actor will have a component. So instead of a static mesh actor, it's going to create an empty actor with a mesh component, and the pivot is going to be on the mesh component, not on the actor. And that can be confusing for users because sometimes you want to select all the actors and like at runtime change a rotation. Well, this might not work as expected because the rotation will not be applied on the actor, but not be applied on the component, but on the actor. So it'll be slightly different. And it's also better for scene management as well. Of course, keep your scene hierarchy clean. In 3ds Max, you can have parents, groups. Trying to be clean with this, it's better in Unreal. And regarding textures, game textures, well, texture for real-time engines, you want to avoid non-power of 2 resolutions because you won't have bitmaps by default if you do that. So for memory management, it's much better. And also avoid very high resolution textures. I've seen some projects with textures like over 16K. There's a way to do better, like usually break out the geometry or the materials into different materials, or optimization in the DCC at first. And finally, for materials, so when you are in Unreal, we added, I think it was back in 4.26 or 27, a list of Datasmith master materials. So these are very handy, ready-to-use master materials for opaque, translucent, emissive, subsurface scattering, decals, and also added a nice water material. These materials are available in the Datasmith content. So if you use the templates, the architecture templates, these will be already enabled by default. And these are available in your Datasmith content materials folder in the plugins. There are some examples in the templates. If you use the ArchViz template, there's an interior scene, and we have some little spheres here with different looking materials. These materials are optimized both for raster, so lumen, and path tracer, and it looks really good. And these are really easy to use and perfect for when you need fast material libraries. Okay, so how about a demonstration? So here we have 3ds Max and Unreal side by side. This is a recording, but I'll be commenting on the video, and this is all real time. There's no cuts, so there's going to be some loadings here and there. So we have an interior scene in 3ds Max. This is a V-Ray scene. We have some nice geometry, some materials, lights, a bit of everything, really. So let's first start by making sure that the resolution for textures, procedural textures, is not too high. I chose 256,000 pixels. So that's pretty much mid-range. Let's do a synchronize. So the synchronize will be longer depending on the complexity of the scene. So that could be the number of materials, the number of the geometry, the complexity of the geometry. You'll have a little loading progress bar at the bottom, and it'll say, it's kind of hard to read here, but it says export geometry, the number of geometries left. This can be really useful for profiling and knowing where in your scene there is bottlenecks. Okay, so that now the screen is synchronized. So we can move again in 3ds Max. It'll lock the screen when you export in 3ds Max. Now let's import in Unreal Engine. So first, go and add the direct link import. Then you'll see here we have our source, which is 3ds Max in our Unreal Fest scene. So let's import that. Now we have to choose a folder where to import it, and the Datasmith import options. So as I said earlier, we have geometry, materials and textures, lights, cameras, animations. Let's import. Oh, quick tip for when you import a scene and you don't want to use backlighting, you can disable generating light maps. It's going to be a little bit faster. And there we go. Let the shaders compile for a couple seconds. And we have our scene from Max in Unreal. It already looks a lot better. So in our scene here, we've got spotlights. Oh, actually, hang on. I'll let the cursor catch up. So when you do an export and import in Unreal, you'll have a Datasmith scene file, and you'll have your textures, your materials, and your geometry. So the materials are combine. Oh, it's already here. Okay, so I was showing just here the icon. So the icon for the status is on the top left, and here's the direct link re-import, auto re-import. If you want to disable that, if you don't want the editor to constantly re-import your scene when you do updates in the DCC, that's very handy. Okay, so and now let's toggle auto sync. And so you've seen the screen flash for a second. This means that it's synchronizing just once, but it's doing a diff sync. So it's not going to synchronize everything at once. So let's select the lights here. The spotlights are a bit low, so we'll select all of them in max and move them up a little bit. Here we go. And you've seen in Unreal, it's already sent the data, and it's already synchronizing. And you'll see all the spotlights go up. And here we go. So now we have correct lighting. So then let's change some more stuff in our scene. Let's change the material. So we have here a kind of red like material for our tray. We want to change, let's say, one parameter, which is the color. So we'll go for like a white-gray color. Here we go. Don't go full white because this won't be PBR. So we did the change in Max, and it's already sending in Unreal. And there we go. Let the GI update for a sec, and there's our gray tray. So now let's have a look at our cameras. So in the scene, we have, you can do it, little cursor. We have a camera, which is like a point of view of the living room. So let's move. Oh, there's some geometry in the way. So this is actually near clipping that is not transferred to Unreal. So to change that, just select your camera, go in the camera settings, advanced, and there's a near clipping options, which is by default set to a really short value of 10 centimeters. So let's do 3 meters here. And there we go. And now we have our full view. But then there's something a bit off. If you've seen earlier in the scene, it was looking a bit more warm. So you see here, yeah, camera is like the tint is not as good. It's a bit blue. So let's go back to the camera and let's change in our 3ds Max camera settings the temperature of our camera. Here we go. So there's a few settings you can change as well. you can change the lens, the aperture, of course the temperature. So let's change to what did I say here? 5300. So it's going to synchronize in a second. There we go. And the scene is looking a little bit warmer already. So, of course, as I said, you can change the aperture, the focal length. You can change your film sensor as well. So if we change to an APS-C Canon, so you can see it's going to change in Unreal. So the thing is a bit different, and then APS-H. Basically, any supported setting in Direct Link will be sent to Unreal with AutoSync and Direct Link. All right. So when you have your scene and you are ready to do some renders, you can either render, so I won't be showing it here, but you can render with the movie render queue, but you can also do some renders from the editor, either viewport or we're going to see in a few minutes with the path tracer. You can change some settings for Lumen. If you want to keep a real-time target, don't go too high in the values because some values will really slow down the editor, like the GI update speed. You can add some bloom. So here, changing a little bit of the convolution bloom intensity, just to have a match that, something that matches your taste a little bit more, a bit better. So, and once you're done, you can do a path tracing shot. Well, we won't do the full path tracing convergence here because it can take a couple minutes for interior scenes in particular. But I have a shot at the end of the presentation where you'll see the scene rendered with the path tracer. So you see, yeah, it's... So the machine it was recorded on is using a Ryzen Threadripper CPU and a NA 6000 GPU for rendering. Okay, so now let's see the direct link statuses. So for example, if you shut down your computer for the night or open on another project, you will see that the direct link status icon will change here. So I've opened a different scene, and here it's still on auto reimport, so I will disable that. And you'll see that the icon changed to red, which means that it's not connected anymore. It can't reconnect, which is logical because we opened a different scene. If I do a reimport, it won't like it. So let's open our interior scene again. Take a few seconds. You can see that the icon changed because it discovered the source for direct link, so it knows it's here. It's just that it's not synchronized yet. So, and once the scene is loaded, you'll just have to press synchronize, reimport manually in Unreal, or toggle auto reimport, and the import will be done. Once again, so this is a heavy-ish scene, mostly because of the V-Ray materials. You'll see that it takes a little while to export. It takes a little while to even open in Max. Be careful with your materials. Try to optimize at the source. So we are now updating materials, updating textures. Here we go. So the scene is now synced. So you can re-import manually. And now the icon will change to the green tick because the scene is now synchronized and connected. So yeah,